Well, good evening and welcome to New Life Church Teesside's midweek meeting. It is a joy and a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm Pastor Luke Taylor, and I'm really looking forward to spending this time sharing with you and investigating with you what that first Christmas was like. We're going to cut through all of the greeting card glitter, and we're going to have a look at what that first Christmas looked like. Before we start, I'm going to pray, but before I do that, it is tomorrow, as I understand, Stephen Peacock's 30th birthday, the big 30. So can I just say, Stephen, a very, very happy birthday, and thank you so much for all of the hard work you've been doing as part of the team to get us online each and every Sunday, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, Stephen. Right, let's pray, and then let's get into this morning's tonight's meeting. Lord, I just pray, Lord, that tonight will be, Lord, it will be information, but it'll be more than information. And Lord, I just pray, Lord, everything that we share tonight, everything that we explore tonight, Lord, will be useful for us. Will, Lord, help back our faith up. And Lord, give us a confidence, Lord, and also reveal things to us about what happened when you came and you were born on this earth. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Well, we are going to start by going back in time again. And I've been looking forward to going back in time. I enjoyed it a lot last time. But I have to say, I figured using the DeLorean this week, it's a little ostentatious. I mean, it's a bit, a little bit much. Certainly going back to the first Christmas, I thought I'm going to get noticed. So I went back in time to meet with H.G. Wells, and I got him to put me something else together to get me to use today. So if you excuse me for one moment, I'm just going to pop off and find my time machine. Hold on one second. Okay. Here we go. Right, there we go. There we go. In the time machine. Right, are you ready to go back in time? We are going to go to the 25th of December in the year 0. Boop, 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 boop. Nothing happened. That's embarrassing. Oh, of course. That's the wrong date, isn't it? It's the wrong date. 25th of December in the year 0. There was no year 0. It goes from 1 BC to 1 AD. And we know 25th of December is not right, isn't it? Now, I remember hearing from someone 4 AD because of the date when Herod died. Herod died 6 AD, so 4 AD is the date, and sometime in March. Let's just head for general March. Okay, right, this time, let's go back. Boop, 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 boop. We will go to the 3rd of March in the year 4 AD. 4 AD. Let's give it a try. Okay, here we go. It's working. Oh, here we go. Oh, that made me dizzy. Oh, dear me. Oh, well, we've definitely gone somewhere. I guess we'll have to pop out and have a look. Just give me 1 second. Let's have a little look where we are. And we are... where are we? This doesn't seem right. Hang on. This isn't right. I mean, I knew it was on a starry night, and this is definitely a starry night when the hills are bright, and the world is sleeping calm as can be. But this doesn't. I think I've got the wrong date. I've done it again. Sorry about this. I was expecting to see the angels in the air, and I'm gonna have to call my dad again. That is so embarrassing. Okay, I'm gonna call him. Where is he? Okay. I'm going to give him a quick call now. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I just need... You don't get a good signal when you're back in the past, unfortunately. Hold on 1 second. Oh, I've done this wrong. This is definitely wrong. Okay, let's see if we can call him. Come on. Where is he? There we go. He's calling. Calling him. He needs to answer. Hi, Dad, you there?
Hello.
Got you.
Oh,
How you doing?
hiya, son. How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm afraid I've got lost again. It's okay. I've got you on the other screen. You don't need to be on your phone. Unless you're speaking to somebody else.
Oh, okay. No. It's okay. That's fine.
I've got lost again. I went back to the first Christmas.
Where did you want to be?
Well, I wanted to go see the first Christmas. So I knew it wasn't the year zero. I knew that doesn't exist. I know it's not the 25th of December. I remember people saying shepherds were out in the fields. It must have been springtime, March. And of course, Herod died in 6 AD.
No.
Sorry?
No, I think you're very confused there, I'm afraid.
No.
You're very confused.
No, that's right. I've heard that.
Yeah. You might have heard it, but there's a lot of people say a lot of things. But really, if we're going to get it right, we need to log into a more historical way of looking at things.
Right. Okay. So I've got the wrong date. Before, okay, I'm going to ask you to guide me around this scenario. I'm going to... But before I do, can you just tell me... I know you helped me out a lot last time, but what evidence are you actually using to discuss all of this with, anyway? How do I know you're going to be right? Because I've got it wrong twice now.
Okay, right. Well, it's a good question. I think, first of all, we have to start with recognizing that we've got some very authoritative people who were there at the time, or were there just afterwards and talked to the people who had been there. And of course they are Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John. And their Gospels, if you like, are really, really important. Then we've also got Paul, we've got Peter, we've got the brothers of Jesus who are very important, James and Jude. We've also got a writer called Josephus, who was around after the time of Jesus. He was around primarily, if we start to talk about the early 60s, if you like, through into the 70s and after. Josephus was a Sadducee. You've read about them in the Bible.
They didn't believe in life after death, did they?
No, he didn't. That's correct.
That's
he
why
was one of the elite. That's a good joke. I laugh every time I hear it. He was a general on the side of the Jews to start with, and then he swapped sides over to the Romans. So we have to take him with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But Josephus himself quoted from a guy called Nicholas of Damascus. And Nicholas of Damascus is really important because he wrote the accounts that Josephus draws from.
Right.
Nicholas goes on later on to actually become a biographer of Augustus Caesar. So he was a very credible person in his day. Then you've also got a lot of histories and comments from early Christians. This is over the first 150 years of Christianity, if you like.
Okay.
Some just slightly later. Yeah, I've made that slide for you there. So you can see the type of people who we can draw upon. Justin Martyr, very important. He was a Roman, and Tertullian. So there's a lot of people with great insight that we can draw on. And then if you go to non-Christian sources, there's a load of people from the Roman historians, the principal Roman historians like Suetonius and Dio Cassius. And then you've also got the Greek historians. So there's a large range of people that we can draw from.
Okay.
And I guess we'll quote from most of them. if we get that far.
Okay, that's
during
good.
the course of the
That's
night.
good. So we know we're working from real sources. What about you? I know sometimes it's. By the way, I've moved position now. I've gone to Bethlehem. It's
I
daytime
noticed
now.
it. Yeah,
I just changed where I was
it's
a little
daytime.
bit. Um, we've gone over a few of these things before. What's your background on this stuff? Is this just a hobby for you, or is this something that you've invested much time in? Or
That's a good question, I guess. I've had an academic interest since I was 19. So I guess I've got, heading towards half a century of research. But I've also, as an academic, I did my master's on cultural and textual theory, which particularly looked at the way stories work and the way that stories have worked differently over time. I haven't finished my PhD. I dropped it, unfortunately, but again, I was looking at that. So I do have some specialism, shall we say, that hopefully helps towards a view on this.
okay, great. Okay, so where should we start? What would you say in terms of working out the date of Jesus' birthday? What's the stuff we really need to hit upon to pinpoint the date of Jesus' birth?
Okay, if we're going to hit the time of Jesus' birth, we butt up against some problems that people throw up. One of which is the death of Herod. When did the death of Herod happen? But I think if we start with the gospel writers first, because they give far more precise details about the birth of Jesus, and then we can move to other sources that move further away in time. But I think if we start there, we need to talk about the circumstances of the birth of Jesus, the birth of John the Baptist, and then we can move on to the census. We can move on to the Star of Bethlehem and the wise men. But I think we have to really start with those first gospel accounts, and surprisingly, how much detail they give us that people often miss.
Okay. So where should we start if we want to pinpoint the date? Where should we start now?
Well, I think first of all, an understanding of Herod probably is important. So just very quickly, what I will mention is that Herod is a puppet king. And by that, we mean that he was independent, technically, although he was under the more covert control of Rome, if you like. Judea was an independent country. Right. He was king of that country. And they did not pay taxes to Rome.
Whoa.
Remember that.
I've got to stop you there. The reason Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem was for a census for taxes, wasn't it?
No, it was for a census and registration, where it doesn't say taxes. That's an assumption that people make.
Oh, okay. Right, so we'll come back to that.
Yeah, sure. So although Herod paid huge amounts of gold to Augustus to keep independent, you have to try and realize that he was really quite important to Rome. And the reason is that there was the next door to the Roman Empire, there was the Empire of the Parthians.
Right.
And if you remember, Parthia was the old Persian Empire, if you like. Mm-hmm. When Alexander the Great had conquered everything right up to India, and his empire fell apart, there'd previously been the Persian Empire. After the death of Alexander the Great, it becomes Parthia rather than Persia.
Right, so
Persia. But basically, if you look at that map, you will see that it butts right up against Rome. And there was a famous general called Crassus. Crassus was in a battle at Carrhae and lost his Roman standards, his eagles, and it was a massive disaster for Rome. They moved north into Europe, and they conquered Europe. They moved all across the southern edge of the Mediterranean into North Africa. But they didn't go any further, really, than Syria and where Judea was, because the Parthians were at the other side. They're very important to remember, because the wise men come from there.
From Parthia.
And that gives rise to a massive political problem for Herod.
Right. Okay. So there's the Roman Empire, there's the Parthian Empire, and then there's Israel sort of wedged between the two.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So
If you want to see what happens after the death of Herod, if you want to see the size of the Roman Empire, you probably able to see it there. So that's the extent of the Roman Empire after Herod's death.
right.
And Judea becomes Roman.
So Judea
by the
becomes
time
Roman
Jesus
at
is
that
an
point.
adult,
But so it's Roman influenced and I guess heavily influenced, maybe occupied in a sense, but not part of the empire in the same way that it becomes part of the empire.
that's correct.
Okay.
The one thing that we get for the date of the death of Herod is through Josephus. And if you remember, I've mentioned Josephus, and Josephus is drawn upon Nicholas of Damascus. Sorry.
So this is where we get the 6
Nicholas
BC
of Damascus.
from.
Yeah, well, the dates fly around usually as 4 BC.
4 BC.
BC rather than AD.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean 4 BC for Herod's death. Is that so? Herod died 4 BC.
So of course, if he died 4 BC, Jesus would have to have been born before that.
Yes.
And you get the silly, thing of Jesus born 6 years before his birth. It doesn't work. But there's a reason for it. So let me explain why Herod's death is linked to 4 BC.
Okay.
And why it isn't accurate, because this is really important. Josephus records the fact that Herod was very ill. When he was looked as if he was dying, there was some premature celebrations, and there was 2 rabbis that basically had students, and the students thought that Herod was dead, tore the Roman legions down, and rioted. And in revenge, Herod, who wasn't dead, burns at the stake 2 rabbis. And it says that happened on the night of a lunar eclipse.
Right.
And it also says that he died shortly afterwards, and his son Archelaus takes over. He had another son called Antipa, who was going to take over, but he kills him just before he dies. It wasn't safe being a son of Herod for various reasons.
Yes.
So the reason that the 4 BC is pulled up is because there was a very strong lunar eclipse at that point.
Okay.
And for some reason, Herod's death always became attached to that. There was also the issue of coins. And, of course, one of the best ways to show the reign of somebody is you look at the date that someone stamps on a coin with their head on it. And again, Herod's face stops being on at some point. Now, just very quickly on that, his son shared the coins with him because there was a point where Herod stopped being technically a friend of Caesar. Friend of Caesar was a title.
Right.
And what Herod had done was the Arabs who lived based in Petra, if you like, modern day Petra, that was called Arabia at the time, and they attacked Herod. Herod got involved in the battle without the permission of Caesar. And the Arabians technically were client kings of Rome as well. And Augustus nearly had Herod killed. And at that point, to demote him, if they like, they made him lose his title, friend of Caesar.
Right.
And so his son appears as co-ruler on some of the coins. So that mix between the coin dates and the lunar eclipse of 4 BC drove consensus to the fact that Herod died in 4 BC. But what they didn't pick up on is there were lots of lunar eclipses around that time.
Right.
It wasn't such a standout event. And if you take a co-regency approach to Herod's throne, the 4 BC really fizzles away. Okay. And it doesn't work.
Okay, so that's...
And that's really important, because every time someone says Herod died in 4 BC, that's the 2 bits of information they're drawing.
Right, so there's more than one eclipse, and there was more of a core-reigning thing going on towards the end.
Correct.
So Herod probably died later than 4 BC.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, okay.
And in fact, if we... I tell you what, let's nudge into the scriptures first, and then we'll come back and pick up that, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And the starting place, according to Luke, it says, in the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah of the division of Abijah. Now, this division of Abijah is incredibly important, because what happened to us, there were so many priests that they didn't all get the chance to serve all the time. So what they did was they divided them up, and even drew lots at some point as who from each section would serve. And
So like a rota system.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So Abijah, and they served on the 8th course, and there was 24 different courses established. So basically, you would serve twice a year.
24 courses.
So it means,
right.
Yeah. So it was either in March or September. That was the only time that the course of Abijah came up.
Right. Okay. So we know
now that's
when Zechariah was serving.
It's either March or it's September.
Right. Okay.
But there's some reasons for going with September, not March. For going for March,
okay,
and not September, which we'll touch on as we go through. In Luke, it says, after these days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she kept herself hidden. After is a term in the Greek that literally is often used as being in the next day. So if you remember the story, he's serving in the temple, angel appears, you're going to be a father.
Mm-hmm. He
was old, his wife was old, they didn't think they could have kids. He was serving in the September, probably. And then, he was serving in the March, my apologies. He was serving in the March, and then the angel appears, he loses the power of speech. He would have immediately had to cease his duties because he was disqualified for it, if you like. And then if you want to read the story for yourself,
because he couldn't speak?
You'll get all the details. Correct.
So because he couldn't speak, he's dismissed from his duties for that period.
Yeah. So he goes home, and immediately after he goes home, if you like, his wife conceives. So he gets the promise, he goes home, has marital relations with his wife, which probably came as a bit of a surprise to her, and John the Baptist comes along.
Of course, because
that's important.
John the Baptist isn't a divine conception the same way Jesus was. John the Baptist is conceived the normal way, so he has to finish his priestly duties before he does his husbandly duties.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what would have happened. And then it says in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city in Galilee named Nazareth to a virgin. And the angel says...
So that's the 6th month of John the Baptist, of Elizabeth's...
Yeah, of Elizabeth's...
pregnancy.
Pregnancy.
Not the 6 months of the year.
It says she hid herself away for 5... It said she hid herself away for 5 months.
Right.
And then, presumably, she knows she's convincingly pregnant and not just getting plump.
Okay.
At that point, she's older. Nobody would expect her to be pregnant. And at that point, Mary goes off. So it says that Mary went there and remained there about 3 months.
Can I just, before you jump in, there's another slide there. Just so you know, it's not the 6th month of the year, it's the 6th month of the pregnancy. It does specifically say, and behold, your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has also conceived a son. And this is the 6th month with her who was called barren. That's how we know it's the 6th month of the pregnancy, not the 6th month. So it's not June, it's the 6 months of the pregnancy.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
Right.
And it's probable. I mean, she stays with her until the end of until the end of the pregnancy. She stays with her from 6 months to the 9th month when John's born.
Yes.
And at that point, she is 3 months pregnant herself, and returns home. And probably that's when Joseph found out she was pregnant.
Yes.
Because she'd been away.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So you can imagine his shock. She comes back pregnant, and that is somewhat of a surprise to him.
Yes, that makes sense.
And we read the story, of course, where he was going to dismiss her and put her away and have a divorce until God intervenes.
Mm-hmm.
So what we can focus on, March the 29th, the preceding Sabbath was the 24th of March, which was the 8th week of the duties on the Sabbath. Forgive me, I'm being very technical, but I'm actually putting up the dates when it must have happened for Zechariah.
Well, so this must have been when Zechariah was serving, you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got 4 BC, March 29th, and preceding Sabbath, March 24th. Oh, I'm not following how that gives you the date.
I'll give a better rundown later on if you like, but let's just deal with it in faster terms, and then we can come back to a sort of a better way of doing that. But what that 6 month difference would mean that John is born in the March and Jesus would be born in the first half of September, if it went to term. And obviously we don't know that, but it's interesting because it does bring us almost exactly the due date for Jesus would have been on the Festival of Trumpets.
And that's
the Yom
significant,
Kippur
isn't it?
celebrations. Well,
the Day of Atonement,
it doesn't have
day
to
in the
be
Jewish
significant,
calendar.
but you could certainly read a lot of significance into it.
Yeah. So it's an important date in the Jewish calendar. I mean, it's like the big one.
It's a very important date in the Jewish calendar, and that looks, if Mary went to full term, it would have been on that day.
Which you've got to assume the perfect.
I'm not saying she was. I'm just saying
you have to assume the perfect life started with the perfect pregnancy.
Well, it wouldn't be an unreasonable thing to work around.
Yeah.
So, whereas I would not say this is definitely the day that Jesus was born, what I would say is it was around then, and likely, even probable, that it was those days.
Okay. Okay, so we're hammering in on a date there. I guess it's easy to hammer in onto the September date. That makes sense. But how about the 4 BC? How do you get to the 4 BC?
Okay. Well, the birth of Jesus would not have been 4 BC. It would have been 3 BC.
Oh yeah, sorry, I misread that.
Yeah, that's okay. What we do know is that in Luke 3 verse 1, he says it was in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar.
Right.
When Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea, Herod was the tetrarch of Galilee, his brother Philip was tetrarch of Iturea and Trachonitis, and Lysanus the tetrarch of Abilene. During the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, the word of God came to John, son of Zechariah, in the desert. So what we have is a very precise detail of when John starts to preach his message.
Right. Okay, yeah.
So we have a kickoff for John the Baptist. And then it says, when all the people were baptized, Jesus was baptized too. Now, Jesus himself was about 30 years old.
So we know the year that...
So we know that Jesus was 30-year-old, about 30, maybe just before, in 2728 AD.
Right.
We can work out 2728 AD because of the time of Tiberius occupied the throne. There was a little bit of overlap. So, classic scholars have sometimes argued 2728 for this date.
Okay.
But Jesus is Jesus's 15th year of Tiberius. He starts his ministry 2728 AD.
Which means
if we say 28 AD,
he was born.
But it basically tracks Jesus back to a birthday in 3 BC September.
3 BC in September.
3 BC.
Okay, so I definitely picked the wrong date. I was way out. Okay, well that's good to know.
That's true.
Okay, right. Okay.
Now
So
this is where some people have the problem, because what they say is, first of all, they say Herod died in 4 BC, and Herod features in the story, but I've explained that already.
Yep. What about the census?
The date of Herod's death was wrong. And then the second thing is, how can there be a census when Herod didn't pay taxes?
Yeah.
And this is where the story becomes more interesting, I guess. We talked about the part of that, if we go on to the census, it says in those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world would be registered. And it says this was the first registration when Quirinius was the governor of Syria.
Okay, yeah.
So this is the first registration. There is another registration that happens later.
Right.
And it's referred to in the book of Acts, and that's in 6 AD.
Right. Okay.
But that's why they say this is the first registration.
So the one that people usually track it as is not the
The
first one.
taxation one was in 6 AD.
So the taxation
When
one was the one that was
the
years
Romans
later.
were in then, and at that point in time, taxation was brought in.
Okay, right. So this is
the
the
first
one.
registration.
So this wasn't for taxation.
No, it wasn't. Augustus was fairly jealous, really, of his desire to be the most highly thought after of the Caesars, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Julius had a month named after him. Can you guess where it was?
July.
Correct. And to honour him, the Senate decided to rename a month in his name. Can you imagine what that is?
I know that. I'm trying to bring it up, but it's all crashed on me. There we go. Hang on, I've got it. August.
And they even added a day. Can you believe it? They even added a day to the calendar to make it so that there was 31 days, same as July.
Really?
So that he had parity with Julius.
That's insecure. That is.
It's the Senate trying to be playing safe, really, and to make sure that there wasn't a problem.
Wow.
Am I out of shot, or do you need me to move?
I need you to move a little bit to your left. Other way. The other left.
Other way.
That's it.
The other left. Okay, that's fair enough. So they wanted to give a very special award to him, and it was called the Father of the Nation, part of a tray.
Right.
And what they decided to do was to make sure that everybody had to register through the whole Roman Empire and swear allegiance to Caesar.
Right.
Now, we know of this event, actually, we know it from Josephus, although people have tended to miss it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that when this comes out, it's mentioned, for example, in other histories, like King Agabus of Armenia. It's mentioned in their records about people having to travel to their birthplace for registration.
Mm-hmm.
But we also find that Luke says that this was one of the two registrations of the people when Cyrenius was governor of Syria.
He says this was one of two. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So again, I'm pointing back on that.
So the fact that there's two censuses is something that's actually in Scripture.
Yeah, Quirinius is the same as Cyrenius. It's just the Greek, the different name.
I'll just say that we always think there was one census, but the fact that in Scripture it says there was two.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go.
It's one of those things that people just miss.
Yeah.
It's hard to say why, really, but certainly people do.
I missed it.
And this oath of allegiance was really important. But what happened was the Pharisee movement at the time of this refused to take allegiance because they had to swear allegiance to Caesar.
Right.
And Josephus mentions because there was only 6,000 Pharisees in the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to think there was Pharisees everywhere, in every village or whatever. But there were a very select bunch. We don't know how many numbers increased rapidly between the birth of Jesus and the time of Jesus' ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the time of the birth of Jesus, there was only 6,000.
Wow.
And Herod was going to kill all the Pharisees. He was going to have them all put to death.
All of them?
Yes.
Wow. That's.
And they only escaped because Herod's sister decided to pay a fine to cover their disobedience.
For not going to be registered. and pay
Yeah,
homage.
and since that was going to go back to Augustus, Augustus approved it. What you've got to remember is Augustus, they've got Parthia on that other side. Herod, he knows, has a difficult job with the Jews. Augustus and Herod know very much about the revolution that happened against previous rulers when they tried to control the religion of the Jews. And so Augustus understood some of the problems that Herod had. And since he got the money, he accepted the fines given to the Pharisees rather than insisting that the Pharisees get killed.
Okay. So that's enough to point us to that date of where there's two censuses.
So we know, for example, other countries on the registration had to travel to their own hometown. We know that everybody had to swear the oath of allegiance to Caesar. So both of those together give some very strong circumstances.
3 BC is a good date, not just because of the Luke's date and of John the Baptist's ministry, but also the date of the censuses.
It is also the year of the Participatory. It's also the year that they gave that honour to Augustus.
So 3 BC and September early time.
Yes, but of course the people could do the registration over several months. They didn't all have to turn up on the same day.
Oh, I mean the birth.
That's
I'm trying to pin down the birth date.
Yes, yeah. The reason I'm saying that though is we get the feeling the way that we usually tell the story. Everybody had to be taxed, and we imagine everybody on the road at exactly the same moment, having the sort of one day to get registered. And when Mary and Joseph arrive at the inn, it's full because everybody had turned up for registration.
But there must have been a certain amount of that is the case, because not only was the city full, there's no way you would choose to travel weeks before birth, given a choice.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, I guess, the way that timescale pans out. We know that Joseph, for example, at first wasn't willing to accept Mary.
Yeah.
The timing of how that angel appearance happened to him, of when he was told not to put her away. You with me? But then the other thing I think that becomes important is Bethlehem was probably full because of people who were at the Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah.
Of course, because that's the big date of the year, isn't it? Yeah, of course.
Because the date, sure.
Yeah.
And there must have been a window. I don't think they would have wanted to leave it any later than that, because the weather can become inclement after September. But maybe they didn't want to travel at the height of summer heat.
Okay.
So Mary pregnant, they've got to wait probably until the weather cools down a bit before they travel. But they've got to make sure that they get there before the birth.
Okay, but so that they get there, and if it is around about Yom Kippur time, that makes sense. That place will be heathen. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Interesting. Right. Okay. Now I think we've spent enough. We've spent 40 minutes on the date, and that's not the only thing I want to talk about. I want to get there. I want to see the wise men. I want to see those 3 wise men, with their gifts. These 3 kings who travelled afar, bearing gifts. One in a scooter, one in a taxi. No, I want to see the 3 wise men. How can I make sure that I see the 3 wise men while I'm here?
Well, of course, this gives again, you've got to go back to the source material and see what the Gospels really say, rather than what we presume they say. So, for example, if you go to Luke, it says this. At the end of 8 days, when he was circumcised, he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the time of purification, according to the law of Moses, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. And when they performed everything according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth.
So they left Bethlehem after Jesus was named
and circumcised.
Okay. Then
the wise men hadn't been there yet.
So there must be something that took place. And if they're going to go back to Galilee, they then would have to then come Why would you go back to Bethlehem again?
Right. Well, this is where it becomes interesting, I suppose. What we find is that you've got to remember that Herod dies in the January he dies in 1 BC. But Herod was desperately ill. And if you remember, people thought that Herod was dead before he was dead. And one of the things that happens at the time of the death of Herod is there is a huge riot and insurrection and rebellion starting in Galilee. And the guy that started it in Galilee, back where Nazareth is, and the person who did it was a guy called Judas the Galilean. And we read about him in Josephus. And Judas the Galilean was of the line of David.
Oh, hang on. So was somebody else.
Yeah, Jesus was of the line of David.
Right. So are they related?
So
in some I guess distant way.
Well, they must have been related
in some way. Yeah. Right. Okay.
You know how distantly, I don't know. How many successors to the throne were there?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear in the scriptures that Jesus is not just of the line of David, but probably at the head of the line of David. Right. So if that's the case, there must have been some relative kinship between him and Judas the Galilean. I think Nazareth became a very difficult place to stay.
Okay.
And I think the other thing, of course, is how welcome was Mary back with the family of Joseph?
Yeah, of course. I'm guessing people didn't receive all that very well.
No. So whatever the reason, it would seem that there is a friendly family near Bethlehem, of course, because John and Elizabeth live in the priest's village outside Jerusalem, not too far away from Bethlehem.
Oh, right, okay.
And of course, they would have had family down in Bethlehem. Mm-hmm. So I think the picture is that we see Galilee as a hotbed, and because of that, they go back down to Bethlehem at some point. And the story, of course, bears it out, because when we look at the account of the wise men, it says that Mary and Joseph are living in a house.
Yes, and the child, not the baby. That one I do know. I do know that one.
Yeah. So it talks about a child and not a baby.
Yes.
And then, of course, the last piece of evidence is that when Herod kills the children, he kills children under 2.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's reasonable to assume the wise men or the Magi have said sometime in the past 2 years this child's been born.
Yes. And certainly Jesus would have been if he was born in 3 BC.
Well, that brings us
he would be just over a year, say a year and 3 months,
mm-hmm.
and he's living back down in Bethlehem.
That kind of brings us to the star in a sense, because it's the star that signals the wise men off. Is that right? They follow the star.
Yeah, that's right. They follow the star, and you've got to ask, how did the wise men know about the Jewish Messiah? And there's a very good reason why. Mm-hmm. And it ties back to the book of Daniel. It ties back earlier than that, actually. But for example, when the I think it's even when the Assyrians come against the northern kingdoms, there's a character there called Rabmag in the army of the Assyrians.
Sorry,
Rabmag. There's Rabshakeh and there's Rabshag. The Rabmag. Rab just means chief.
Okay.
So Rabmag is chief of the magicians, the Magi.
Right. Okay.
So we find them even before the Babylonian Empire. We find them in sort of between Kurdistan today and the Caspian. They occupy that northern sort of area. And it's interesting because they're mentioned a lot in Greek historical writings. And we'll come to some of that in a minute, because there's some brilliant eccentricities about these guys. But what we've got is that they become we read of them in the book of Daniel, but we mightn't recognize the name because the name that's used is the Chaldeans,
Right.
cult of the Chaldees. But essentially, they were the Magi. It was the magician sect, if you like, the first practicing magicians, apparently.
Okay.
I know that Egypt had very early practicing magicians, but apparently the source of all magicianish things, whatever you're going to call it, is found originally with these guys.
This leads us to a problem, because the idea that they saw something in the stars,
yeah,
the idea that these magi were practices of strange practices, yeah,
sure,
and they follow a star. It sounds suspiciously like astrology. Not astronomy,
sure.
but astrology. And then you think, well, none of that stuff's good. How did these guys... Because these don't seem like very admirable guys in that sense.
No, I don't think for 1 minute they were. I think what's interesting, it says that Daniel, at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, eventually, because he is able to solve the dreams and the puzzling visions that exist, he eventually gets made head of the Magi.
But he's not like them.
No, but he's made head of them. He's the head honcho.
Because he gets his...
Now remember...
He gets his interpretation from God.
He does. But remember that one of the visions that he gets, he talks about the number of days between the order to rebuild the temple and the coming of the Messiah.
Yes. Yes, he does.
So let's imagine he's head of the Magi. He's head of them. His writings would have been held in awe by the other followers because he's proved to be the guy with all the real information.
Can I just jump in with a comment that's coming on the chat as well? Cliff said the Bible doesn't actually say that they followed the star. They certainly didn't follow the star to Jerusalem, did they? They saw the star.
Well, I think we're splitting hairs there. Let's deal with how that happens, and then you can make your mind up for yourself.
Okay.
So the first thing is they knew that something was going to happen. And they knew that from the number of days that Daniel had given between the rebuilding of the temple and the coming of the Messiah. Now, this was common knowledge. So, for example, 14 years before the birth of Christ, Virgil, the historian, the Roman historian, it looks like he's quoting from Isaiah's prophecy about the coming of the Messiah. Right. I mean, how weird's that? There was an expectation of the time. And this is why people like Judas the Galilean and others thought that they were the Messiah. There was a hatful of potential messiahs. Simon, who was a slave of Herod, tried to take the crown after the death of Herod. It wasn't just the one revolution happening up in Galilee. It was happening down in Jerusalem as well. So we can imagine a situation where the wise men are aware that something's going to happen, and they're looking at the stars because their religion is based around that. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's any credibility.
Can I jump? Can I just? This is where it gets tricky for me, okay? Because their religion's wrong. Yes.
They probably practice human sacrifice, so I would say
that sounds wrong to me. Yeah. So how can it be validated that in their religion they found out about Jesus coming? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, God determined that there was going to be a star that they were going to use. It doesn't mean to say that every star can be used in a similar way.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Yes.
There is an exception. Yeah, but there is an exception.
Yeah.
Now, when I say star, of course, what we must understand is the stars are fixed in the heavens. They don't orbit. The only stars are called wandering stars, or the other name that we give them is the planets.
Yes. That leads
they're the only thing that move, right?
Yeah.
So what they saw was a moving planet. But what was interesting is that Jupiter is the king planet, always been associated. It moved from Virgo into Leo, which was the line of Judah's reference point. Regulus, the king's star, is in conjunction with Jupiter.
So they see this star. They don't follow it. They see it, and then they know something's happening.
I think they followed it. They followed the direction.
But and then it reappears when they're. It says it reappears when they're in Jerusalem. So then they see it again. So I guess in terms of dates and things like that, do we know? Can you track what you're talking about? It going into.
We can. Happily, we can do that. But I think one of the things we need to do is just look at a couple of things. I'm just scanning through some stuff, just if you don't mind.
Yeah, just really aware. It's probably a lot to go into with the Magi.
No, I get that. I'm just want to make sure I'm accurate in what I'm quoting from my notes, to be honest. So Regulus was in Leo, which was Judah, and what happens with the planet, and try and picture this. I mean, we've got a lovely south view from our house, and we can see the planets move across the sky, and they all have a progression. But what happens? They get to the end of their progression and they stop, and then they move back on the progression. And the reason is that it's our viewpoint from Earth, and the way that they travel on their pathway. And it gives rise to if you look at the next one.
That one there.
No, sorry, the one after. What happens is that if you got the next one first and then we nudge back, actually, it would be helpful. Yeah. So when you're on the Earth traveling in a particular direction and the planet's moving, what we find is that a planet will continue to move in a direction until it reaches the outer limits of its orbit, if you like, relative to the Earth. Not its orbit because it continues. It's only a relative to the Earth orbit. But when that point happens, it has a stationary point. And then it starts its progression away again. Now, the significant thing is that the wise men follow the direction of the star. They follow it until it gets to that conjunction point. At that point, they've reached Jerusalem on an assumption. And the assumption is the king's going to be at the palace.
Yeah.
But when they get there and they look and see the star, it says the star stopped over Bethlehem. Not only did it stop over Bethlehem, it stopped over the place in Bethlehem where they had to visit.
Yes.
So if you were standing on Herod's battlements of his palace, there was one day and one point in time where it would have been seen and then stopped in its tracks. The next day, it would have been moving back the other direction.
Okay. So there's one day in
the
cycle that would have happened.
That's correct.
And just so this isn't guesswork, you can actually track the star. The stars are like
you can
clockwork.
go on a planetarium, put in the longitude and latitude references for this, and you can see it. And if you're standing there, not only would you see it over Bethlehem, but Bethlehem was on the horizon in like a saddle. And you would be able to see where the star stopped.
Right.
You with me?
Yeah.
So you would see the horizon of Bethlehem and you would see where the star stopped. And if you want to know what date that was, are you ready? It was the 25th of December, 1 BC.
Hang on. So you're saying that this conjunction that the wise men saw when they were in Jerusalem, then the star stopped over Bethlehem,
Yeah.
is on the day we celebrate Christmas now.
Sorry, 2 BC. Yeah, 2 BC, not 1 BC. Sorry, my apology.
So Jesus would have been
2
1
BC.
year old at this point, 1 and a bit.
He's 1 year, 3 month old, which tallies with who the kill.
Yes, yeah, it does, yeah. So 25th of
So
December.
he's
So are you saying...
25th of
Because
December.
I know we didn't pick Christmas for that date, for that reason. We didn't pick the date, we picked it because it was another festival and we picked that time. Are you saying by some kind of extraordinary...
I'm not claiming anything other than that's the day that it would be happening.
Having
If you
said
wanted
that,
to
it might
stand on the
have
walls
took
of
until the next day
Herod's
to get there, but that's,
Well,
it's not far, but,
that's when... if they wanted to know where it was in Bethlehem, that's where they would have spotted it.
Yeah.
It stopped. The star stopped. I mean, for years, people have said, how on earth can a star stop over anywhere? It's nonsense.
Yeah.
Well, if it's a wandering star, i.e. a planet, yes, stars stop all the time. Planets stop all the time.
Can I ask you as well, if you track this back, this conjunction, this bright star, this
Yes.
would that, if you track back would it have first appeared at around about the right time of the birth?
Yes. We saw a star rise in the east. I mean, they were looking for the event. They knew generally when it was happening.
Yeah. So they were looking for an indicator that it had happened.
They were looking for an indicator. I'm not convinced that we would have spotted it.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair, because we wouldn't have been looking for it.
It's a conjunction. It's brighter. It's noticeable. But at the same time, it was part of their religion and what they did.
I guess that's fair, because
to them, it was significant.
There can be a conjunction of planets at the moment, and I got to say, I mean, I know we get a lot of light pollution. I probably wouldn't notice it.
Exactly. I mean, there's one coming up shortly.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. That one, I've seen that on Facebook loads. That the Star of Bethlehem is going to reappear next week, the week of Christmas, for the first time in 800 years. That's exciting. Is that the one?
No. Oh. But it is Jupiter, but the conjunctions between Jupiter and Saturn.
So it's a different stars, different planets.
Regulus isn't involved in it. But as I say, I think these things were significant to the wise men.
So
how
most people in Bethlehem that night
else?
of the birth and of that wouldn't have. It's not like you're looking up and going, "Oh, something amazing's happening because there's a bright star."
I don't think so. I've got no evidence of that.
Incidentally, right now there is one just beaming over your head on this image. That's so not like that.
No, and the one between Saturn and Jupiter that's coming up happens every 800 years. There's another conjunction every 19 years. There's no indication it's anything to be excited about.
Nothing significant to take from that.
No spiritual significance whatsoever.
Okay, but I'm sure it'll look very nice for those of you who want to go out and see it.
I'm sure it'll be very bonny if you can see it.
Okay, so I find that fascinating that we come down to that day on the 25th. That is rather interesting.
It's strange, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
So
I'm not making any claims for anything to do with that, other than the fact that that's when it would have happened.
Hey, in any given year, you've got a 1 in 365 chance of hitting the right day. I mean,
Well, yeah.
Interesting. So that's so. What is funny is that the date we give presents is quite significant to the date that the wise men gave presents.
Sure. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And of course, it's after this that Joseph is warned not to go, not to stay, and to escape to Egypt. So at this point in time, they escape to Egypt, and then they remain there. It says until Herod died, but Herod's actually going to be dead in a month.
In a month. So how long do you think they were in Egypt for?
Probably not much longer than a month.
Right. Okay. And then they go back to Nazareth at this point. After that,
it says they were going to go back to Bethlehem, but then when they heard that Herod's son Archelaus had taken over, they decided to go back to Nazareth instead. Now, actually, in fairness, this does open up a slightly different gap in Egypt, because what happened was Herod dies in the end of January. He burns the two rabbis at the stake for fostering rebellion among their students. He's in agony at this point. I mean, have you heard about the illness that Herod had? He was in a dreadful state.
Yes, yeah.
His legs were transparent. He's eaten by maggots alive. He tries to commit suicide with a knife, a fruit knife. He's that desperate at one point. But he doesn't last much longer. They take him down to Jericho, to his winter palace. He's suspended in a vat of oil to try and relieve the pain. But he doesn't survive long. Now, when he dies, Archelaus takes over.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if this was the end of January, beginning of February, what we find is that...
And we can read about this in
the
Matthew,
Passover.
can't we? Is that right?
Yeah.
And bring up that first one.
Sure. When we find that Archelaus in his very first Passover, he thinks the people are going to really welcome him, but he botches up the arrangements for Passover. And eventually there's a riot, and he sends the troops in, and he kills 4,000 people in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want an indicator of what it was that made Bethlehem sound dangerous,
mm-hmm.
it was probably the event that took place in the March, when the riot took place and the deaths took place.
And of course, Joseph's warned in a dream about Archelaus. He was afraid to go there.
Yeah. And so they decide. So I would have thought that they didn't return from Egypt thinking about it. They probably didn't return from Egypt till probably the April or the May.
Okay. Well, let's do a very quick, as we draw to the end. It would freeze when you don't want it to freeze, wouldn't it? I mean, that's the way it always goes.
The case.
Okay, let's do very briefly a quick timeline of events. Very brief.
Sure.
So, 4 BC, May 19th to the 26th, Zechariah serves in the temple.
Correct.
Yep. So John is probably conceived May to June, 4 BC.
Correct.
Yep. 6 months after that, Jesus is conceived. We know it's 6 months after that, based on the book of Luke. Yes?
Correct.
Wonderful. So December, Mary goes to stay with Elizabeth.
Yes.
That's 6 months after... Hang on. Have I got that right? Yes, that's both December. They're both December, yes. So Mary goes to stay with Elizabeth. John's then born 9 months after he's conceived. Yep.
Correct.
Mary then returns to Joseph at that point. 3 BC, the Senate calls for the Father of the Nation thing. That's historically verifiable, that one, isn't it? The Father of the Nation award.
It is. And of course, it is in the August when they name the month.
Oh, of course.
So they couldn't have gone for registration. They couldn't have gone for registration earlier than that.
Of course, yes. That makes sense, yes.
And presumably they wouldn't have wanted to do it after.
So that's why you get the when you had the choice between the September or the March for... That's
the killer reason.
That bit
whether
of
to go for March or
difference.
September.
So obviously he receives that in August. Clever, yes.
Yes.
So then Mary and Joseph travel to Bethlehem, September 3 BC, and Jesus is born in September, between the 1st and the 11th, if the due date's correct.
Yes.
Okay. Incidentally.
We're getting there.
Yeah. Do you read much into the fact that it's September the 11th? Other than that, it's an important date, generally speaking.
Other than the fact that it's an important date, but it seems the Bethlehem events of it being crowded, to me, make that work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not crowded for registration, probably.
Right, okay.
But crowded for
and
the
then
event
the
of the
star
holiday.
You've got as a period, you can track the day the star first appeared through planetarium stuff.
14th
of September. So it could be the same date if you push it as far as
King
the 14th.
King Star, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
14th of September, the star first appears in the sky. Jesus is circumcised at the temple on the 8th day, so that's 8 days after his birth. So that tracks us to whatever on there. October, he's presented at the temple. This is when he meets Simeon in the temple and Anna.
And Anna.
So that's in October time. And then October, November, the return to Nazareth. A bit we always forget about.
Yes.
Always forget about that, but that is mentioned in Luke.
And the interesting thing is, some people say, there's a discrepancy in the scripture. There isn't a discrepancy in the scripture. There is a story in the scripture that, and when you look at it in detail, you get to understand it.
Yes. Okay. So then we get to 2 BC. There's year-long celebrations in Rome. Again, that's on record, yes?
Correct.
August, the month, changes its name because that's the date they did the Father of the Nation. They go, hey, remember that date we did that? We're going to name it after you.
Yeah, well, they actually awarded it in 2 BC, but the start of the year from there.
Of course, right, yeah, okay. All the proconsuls go back to Rome unless involved in war. It's a time of great peace. Lovely. Love a bit of that.
And again, all that's tracked in Roman history. And all that list of Roman historians are put in right at the very beginning. That's where we get all this information from.
Great. 2 BC, the third conjunction, and the Magi set off. So they're waiting for something. This is the third conjunction. Again, you can see that happen on that date. That they would have been able to see that from where they are, 8th of September 2 BC. Because, of course, it's not that far, is it, really, for them to go?
No, I mean, you're traveling from northern Iraq. Or mid Iraq,
so 3 months
around that
is a reasonable amount.
It's more or less the journey that Abraham made from Ur of the Chaldees.
Okay, yeah.
Only slightly further up to start with.
21st of October, trial of Antipater. 28th of October, he names his heirs. Pronounce that for me.
Yeah, and Antipater was going to be the heir. He's the one that appears on the coins with Herod.
Okay. We hit December 2 BC. Herod is really ill at this point. The rabbis think he's dead and incite 2 students to tear down the Roman eagles. That goes wrong, very wrong, but they do that on the 5th of December.
Badly.
And then they are, And
again, that's in Josephus, and it's also recorded in other places. So again, this is where we're getting dates from.
Yep. So the 24th of December, the Magi arrive on Christmas Eve in Jerusalem.
Yes.
Everybody loves Christmas Eve in Jerusalem, and I'm sure it's...
The COVID rules weren't as tight then.
And then on the 25th of December, and you said you can track this if you want to, that conjunction of stars takes place. The star stops over Bethlehem. They visit, and Mary and Joseph flee to Egypt. And then Herod's soldiers kill all the boys under 2 in Bethlehem on Christmas Day.
Yes.
And then by the time we hit January, Herod's health is rapidly declining. The rabbis are executed. The eclipse of the moon is that night, and is that when Herod dies?
Yes, that's right.
So
no, but that gives the number of days.
That was the thing that was mentioned. That's just before Herod dies. Yes.
Yes.
Herod gets worse, and then he dies, and he goes to his palace in Jericho, 18th of January. He attempts suicide on the 22nd. Dear me, this really drags out for him, doesn't it?
Yes, it's horrible. It's hideous.
And then Antipater is executed on the 23rd. Herod dies on... That says the 2nd.
I'm going to go back 1 second because there's something we should... a lot of people say, why isn't it recorded in history that Herod killed all those kids?
Mm-hmm. It's because he was pretty well known for killing people in general, I suppose.
and this tells you what he's like. He is determined on his death that he will be grieved for throughout the whole land. Because he knows, really, if he doesn't do something, they'll all celebrate instead.
Yes, yeah.
So what he does, he issues a command for the eldest son from every family of the posh families and establishment of the elite has to come to Jerusalem, ostensibly for his funeral. But when they come, he puts them all inside the racetrack, the hippodrome.
Right.
And keeps them there while he's dying. Don't know how long they were there. But he's got orders to his guard that on his death, every one of them has to be slaughtered. And the reason for that is that if they all die the night he dies, then the whole of the nation will be grieving over his death.
Wow.
So hundreds or thousands of people ready to be killed in the racetrack.
Wow.
Doors locked, guards waiting for news of his death.
Because he wants people to cry on the day he dies.
Correct. And his sister, as she came to the salvation of the Pharisees when they denied over the oath, his sister countermands the order and lets them all go.
So the slaughter
there might have only been 2 to 8 kids killed in Bethlehem, not a big place. How many kids under 2?
Yeah. So that's why history, because that has been an issue for people. Why is history not recorded in the middle of all the other stuff going on? It kind of, sad to say, wasn't a big deal.
No,
it was for the people obviously who lived in Bethlehem, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So then Herod dies. You put January the 2nd. That's obviously the wrong. That's the 20-something. 23rd?
No, 23rd, sorry.
24th? Something like that.
Yeah.
And then March of Passover 1 BC. That's when there's 400 murdered in the temple. Oh,
he
sorry,
tries to stop
4,000 murdered in the temple.
4,000.
Dear me. That's when they try and stop worshippers in the temple.
Yeah.
Dear me. So that's
it's a long story. I'm summarising. It's a long story.
Yeah.
Read it for yourself.
And then 1 BC, Joseph and Mary hear that Herod's died, but then they hear about what's just happened in the temple. 4,000 people slaughtered.
So they're not going to go back near Jerusalem.
No, you wouldn't, would you?
Well, at this point as well, the Roman legions get involved. And again,
This is when Rome gets heavier in.
It is. This is the instigating event for Rome to come in and invade.
Yeah.
Or not invade, because they've already got a presence in Syria.
But
to send the troops in, if you like, and take over.
Yeah. And we'll probably stop there in that case with that particular event, because I think we don't want to lead in the next slide there. So that is a brief timeline of the first Christmas.
Yeah, sure.
That's it's fascinating when you look
at it. It's an eventful time, isn't it?
It is. It's quite an event. I mean, but that's that in the middle of all of that chaos and that circumstance. That's how our Lord and Saviour had chosen to come into our world during all of this stuff going on. But it is one of those things. I always thought it's just one of those things you said, no, nobody knows when Jesus was born. But actually, through history and through working out events and clues in the Gospels, because those dates, those things that we've skipped, they're in the Gospels.
They're in there.
Yeah, they are. They are in there. And it's important to hit on them because they actually do give us enough information to know when that was.
Yes.
So
I'll say one thing. I'm maybe pushing it, but just the irony of things. Nero is advised to move his capital from Rome to Jerusalem because of the prophecy of Daniel. Mm-hmm. Can you believe it? Because it says, and it's recorded in Roman history, because there was an expectation that the Messiah, or the big world leader that would rule everything, would come from. And of course, his father was Germanicus, and he was born in Syria during the campaign. So he felt the connection to it, and he wanted to move his capital there. And then the last incredible thing is the Magi under Mithridates actually visit Nero and bring gifts to him, thinking that he might be the Messiah. Now, so the Magi weren't convinced after the event of Jesus.
You assume these are different people.
Well, these are different, but they're part of the Magi. It's Mithridates is the...
but it just goes to show they were looking, and yet they weren't convinced. So close.
Yes, but it mentions the fact that bearing gifts, they arrived for Nero. Wow.
So you
can get the wrong Messiah, can't you?
You can.
You've got to keep your faith in the right Messiah, because the minute you take your eyes off and go looking elsewhere, you've got a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you very
much. But these, sorry.
Sorry, I know.
I'm like a Duracell bunny. The trouble is, I can just keep going. I'm sorry. You've got to resist the temptation.
Yes, we will. I'm tell you what I am gonna do. I'm gonna mute you now and say goodbye and thank you. And but don't go. I'll speak to you after we've come off the broadcast. But thank you. I hope people have found that really fascinating and interesting. And you can really dig into the history of this. And you've got all this material if people want to get a copy of. Well,
sure.
I'll not put that on you. You know what I mean?
I'm going to bring a book out.
Yeah, because it's all stuff that you can investigate and find out.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that all was. I hope you found absolutely fascinating. Oh, I'm back home. There we go. All of a sudden, I'm back home. I hope you found that fascinating. I hope that you found it interesting. Going through that stuff and looking at those dates. It's great to know. We do know when Jesus was born. We can accurately say when Jesus was born, and verify the stuff that's in the Gospels, and that's important because some people pick holes in the Christmas story and pick holes in what the Gospel's saying, and all of that stuff is verifiable properly. Well, I am just going to wrap up. First of all, can I just put a prayer request out to everybody? Amelia's and my niece Poppy. We sent a prayer request around recently that the fourth family had COVID-19. She's been admitted to a hospital ward. She's got a high temperature and a high heart rate. So can you please keep Poppy in prayer over these next few days? That would be we'd really appreciate that. Coming up over these next few days, we do have this Sunday. This Sunday is our carol service. This is going to be a very, very, very special carol service. I'm so looking forward to this. We can sing our hearts out at home. We might be able to come together, but we've put this together especially for you as the church, but also to reach people. So please share it. The gospel will be preached. There is a fabulous opportunity. Let's try and have more people watching our carol service than could possibly have attended it. And let's believe that as we get this out there, it is going to make a difference. So please, please, please share. And can I ask, if you've already shared it with people, Saturday is the day to remind people, hey, this is on tomorrow. Hey, this is on tomorrow. Please connect with us tomorrow. And let's really believe we're going to see something great happen through our carol service. Then the next thing that will be happening is we have our Christmas quiz. That is on the 22nd of December on Tuesday. Please connect with that. Even if you don't normally join the quiz, let's come together. Let's enjoy this time together. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to have a very big Christmas theme right throughout it, and really looking forward to that. And I think we might be attempting to do one round with live questions over Zoom from Ian. I think we're going to try and make that work. And then I keep forgetting to mention this, so I am going to mention it tonight. Christmas Day, 10:30 a.m. We will be live from our house, me and Amelia, and we'll have Christmas greetings and a few Christmas carols together, and we'll just celebrate Christmas morning together. 10:30 Christmas Day. Can I just say as well, if you want to send your greeting to me, please do. Sunday's the cut-off because I need to put them together. So Sunday is the last day that I will take Christmas greetings. So please do them over the next few days and get them to me. I would really appreciate that. Well, bless you, everybody. Thank you for joining with us today. And I hope this has been useful and helpful. And I hope it helps back up the story we all know is true, but helps back it up in the minds of others as well. Bless you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. And we look forward to the Christmas carol service on Sunday. God bless.